Professor Lane was taken during class. The third-floor lecture hall at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology had never felt more alive. Afternoon sunlight washed across the long rows of students, illuminating open laptops, scribbled notebooks, and the dust that floated around the chalkboard like faint galaxies. Dr. Evelyn Lane, one of MIT's most respected astrophysicists, moved sharply along the front of the room, drawing a complex diagram that mapped dark matter halo interactions around dwarf galaxies. Every motion she made was practiced, deliberate. Every formula she wrote felt like a blade slicing into the unknown. Evelyn lived for this, explaining the invisible, turning cosmic mysteries into solvable structures for the mind sitting before her. But as she wrote the final term of the equation, something changed in the atmosphere, something so subtle that at first only Evelyn noticed it. The hairs on her arms lifted, not from cold but from static. The temperature dropped in a slow, unnatural gradient. Her breath came out faintly visible even though the room was warm a moment ago. Several students glanced around. Someone whispered, "Do you feel that?" Another tapped his laptop, confused when the keyboard froze. Then the projector cut out with a violent pop. The room dimmed. Light panels flickered. A low vibration climbed through the metal chairs, a deep bone-level resonance that felt like the building was humming. Chalk dust lifted from the board, swirling upward in spirals that made no aerodynamic sense. Phones shut off. Laptops died. The emergency lights didn't activate. Electronic silence. Total, absolute, engineered silence. Evelyn stepped away from the board. Everyone remained calm, she tried to say, but the acoustics warped her voice, stretching it unnaturally as if the room itself was bending sound. Then the ceiling began to open. It didn't crack or break. It peeled, splitting along a perfect, razor-thin line that widened into a long, horizontal aperture. From inside came no physical object. Instead, a darkness that was not simply the absence of light but a presence of something deeper, like the void between galaxies. Students screamed, but even their terror slowed down. Time thickened. Movements dragged like corrupted footage. A girl tried to run, but her steps became heavy and syrup-slow. A boy reached for the door, but the metal handle rippled away from his touch. Notes and papers floated upward, weightless, as if gravity itself were turning inside out. Evelyn felt pressure gather at her spine, a pulling sensation, magnetic and inevitable. A pale blue light poured from the fissure, bending in unnaturally straight beams, illuminating dust particles that hung frozen in midair. The light had mass, intention, intelligence. A thin column of it locked onto her. Her feet left the floor. Her body rotated gently as she ascended toward the widening void. Her students stood stuck in molasses, arms stretched desperately toward her but unable to reach. Their faces burned into her memory, terrified, confused, helpless. The ceiling swallowed her whole. She emerged into a chamber that could not exist in human architecture. There were no walls, no corners, only curved layers of metallic surfaces arranged like concentric circles, each one floating independently and rotating at slightly different speeds. The air, if it could be called air, tasted metallic, sterile, charged. A pulsing hum radiated through the chamber. Her limbs felt light, her heart beat too loud. Evelyn lay suspended in a horizontal beam of translucent light, unable to move anything except her eyes. Shapes emerged from beyond the rotating rings, tall beings. Narrow, translucent like living glass, yet rippling inside with flowing silver currents. Their movements were silent and impossibly smooth, bending at no human angles, adjusting and reshaping their silhouettes with each step. One of them reached out a limb, flexible, shifting like a strand of liquid metal, and placed it just above her forehead. A pressure wave hit her mind. Her consciousness tore open. Her memories rushed outward like threads pulled from a tapestry. Her mother's garden in Vermont, her first telescope at 9, her failures in graduate school she hid from everyone, her secret fear that humanity would never truly understand the universe. The being absorbed it all, Then came something else, something foreign. Images blasted into her mind at a scale no human brain was built to handle. A star collapsing in a way that defied physics. A rotating lattice structure the size of a small moon. A corridor of shifting geometry that rearranged itself endlessly. A map, but not of space as humans knew it. A recursive, layered star chart folding into itself like mirrored dimensions. Her heart thrashed. Her breath quickened. Her physical body trembled even though she couldn't move. The being compressed a final, intense symbol into her consciousness, a coordinate sequence wrapped inside a geometric pattern that pulsed with living energy. She didn't understand it, but part of her recognized it, as if it resonated with something buried in her research. Then everything disappeared. Evelyn blinked and found herself standing on the rooftop of the MIT building. Wind rushed against her face. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Boston looked completely normal. Her watch read 3:17 p.m. She had been gone 8 minutes, but her body told a different story. Her legs shook as though she'd run miles. Her skin tingled with static, and in her right palm, faintly glowing beneath the skin, was the same spiraling coordinate symbol she saw in the chamber burned into her like a living watermark. She collapsed to her knees, staring at the mark as it shifted subtly, almost breathing. Below her, students streamed out of the lecture hall in chaos. Emergency crews arrived. Administrators shouted, cameras flashed, but Evelyn barely heard any of it. She now carried a message she didn't understand, a location that was not on any human map, a pattern that pulsed in synchrony with her heartbeat. And she knew with absolute paralyzing certainty that the beings were not done with her. This was only the first contact, the opening move of something vast, intelligent, and impossibly old. Her life had just been rewritten by a force humanity was nowhere near ready to face. The Interstate 40 encounter Hank Rogers had driven trucks for nearly 30 years, hauling freight across the wide and lonely highways of the American Southwest. Night driving never bothered him. He liked the quiet, the long stretches of empty road, the desert wind drifting over the asphalt like a cold whisper. But on this particular night, somewhere east of Flagstaff, he felt something different in the air. It was close to 2:00 a.m. The sky was utterly clear, stars burning bright above the desert as his 18-wheeler rolled along Interstate 40 with its usual comforting rumble. The radio played soft country oldies, the kind Hank could hum along to without thinking. Everything was normal enough that he didn't understand why the hair on the back of his neck had been standing upright for the last 20 minutes. Then the radio crackled, not static, something stranger. A metallic chattering layered like multiple frequencies misaligned. The music warped, slowed, then sped up unnaturally. Hank frowned, slapped the side of the radio. "Not tonight, buddy," he muttered. But the sound only intensified, growing into a rising, mechanical distortion that made his teeth ache. He reached for the volume knob just as every dashboard light in the truck flickered and went dead. The headlights dimmed so fast the desert in front of him nearly vanished. Ah, hell! Then came the blinding light. A white-blue beam slammed down onto the highway about 50 yards ahead, as clean and smooth as a laser carving a line across the earth. The beam didn't illuminate the road, it rewrote it, bending the shadows in impossible ways. The air rippled like heat haze, yet Hank felt the temperature drop sharply inside the cab. His truck stalled instantly, not a gradual slowing, not engine trouble. One moment it moved, the next it was frozen mid-acceleration. Hank's chest hit the steering wheel. His breath whooshed out. He tried to turn the key again, but the key wouldn't even budge. Then something passed overhead. At first he thought it was a plane flying low, but planes didn't glide like that, completely silent, completely steady, moving with the smoothness of a thought rather than a machine. A dark, disc-like object slid across the sky, blocking the stars in a perfect circle. No exhaust, no blinking lights. Just a seamless black craft hovering with absolute precision. "Jesus," Hank whispered. A spotlight, no, a beam of structured energy shot down from the bottom of the craft and enveloped the entire truck. His ears filled with pressure like diving underwater too fast. His vision blurred around the edges. His limbs grew heavy. Then the world tilted. The cab dissolved around him like sand collapsing in slow motion. The seat melted away beneath him. The windshield stretched horizontally until it became a glowing portal of white. Hank fell without falling. He materialized inside an enormous chamber. It wasn't metal. It wasn't organic. It was something in between, a smooth, dark structure with a faint, iridescent sheen, like oil on water. The floor shifted in soft waves under his boots, adapting to his shape and weight. The walls were neither flat nor curved, but constantly, subtly reconfiguring themselves, responding to his presence. Blue lights hovered in midair around him like weightless fireflies. But when one drifted close, he saw it wasn't a light at all, it was an eye. A biological lens inside a floating, translucent structure the size of a marble. Hank instinctively stepped back, but the moment he moved, a large silhouette slid out from the shadows of the chamber. The being was tall, easily 8 feet. Its limbs were elongated, tapering, almost fluid in motion. Its skin shimmered like mercury, shifting texture with every slight movement. Where a face should have been, there was a gently pulsating veil of luminous membrane, rearranging itself in patterns that sent a cold shock through Hank's stomach. It approached him silently. He froze. He wanted to scream, but the sound lodged somewhere deep in his chest. The being extended a narrow, jointless arm toward him. The air thickened. A vibrating hum filled the chamber. When its hand hovered an inch above Hank's forehead, his mind exploded with sensation. Memories shattered open, his childhood home in Oklahoma, the first time he drove a truck, his divorce, his long nights on the road trying not to think about how lonely he'd become. The being sifted through him like someone flipping pages in a book. But then something else. A message, sent not in language but in instinct, compatibility achieved. Hank's vision collapsed into a burst of white. He woke up slumped over the steering wheel, gasping. The truck's engine was running. The headlights were on. The radio played static. His hands trembled violently as he checked the clock. 2:47 a.m. 47 minutes had passed. A road inspection team's truck pulled up behind him, flashing its yellow lights. 2 workers jogged forward. "Sir, are you all right?" one asked. "Your vehicle's been sitting here unresponsive for nearly an hour. We thought you'd had a stroke." Hank didn't answer. He stared into his rearview mirror. On his forehead, beneath his cap, faintly glowing in the dark, was a small, circular mark, a perfect ring of light, pulsing slowly as though following a heartbeat that wasn't quite his. And as the desert wind whispered across the highway, he felt it, a presence still watching him, still waiting, as if the encounter had only been the beginning of the examination. Blue light over Denver. Abigail Hart had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift at St. Luke's Medical Center in Denver. The kind of shift where time blurred, alarms blended together, and the exhaustion settled deep into her bones like cold fog. At 11:56 p.m., she pushed through the hospital's glass doors into the staff parking lot, grateful for the crisp Colorado air and the quiet of the sleeping city. The lot was nearly empty. Her breath rose in faint clouds. Her sneakers scraped gently against the pavement as she trudged toward her old silver Honda. She fished for her keys, rubbing her eyes. For a moment she thought she saw a strange reflection on the car's hood, a shimmer like moonlight splintering into thin strands. She blinked again. Nothing. Then the wind stopped. Not slowed, stopped. Every sound, the distant traffic, the humming streetlight, even the rustling leaves along the fence, dropped away with impossible suddenness. The silence was so abrupt it felt physical, like a weight pressing down on the air. Abigail lowered her keys. "Hello," she called, though she wasn't sure why. Then came the light. A vibrant blue glow bloomed directly above the parking lot, not shining down from a spot in the sky but descending like a curtain being lowered. The light did not flicker or spread naturally. It fell in a perfect cylindrical shape, as though bound by invisible walls. The entire atmosphere took on a shimmering, aquatic quality, bending around the glow as if trapped inside it. Abigail stared upward. Floating maybe 30 feet above the asphalt was a spherical disturbance, a pulsating orb of blue energy, layered with swirling rings that rotated independently of each other. Lightning-like tendrils lashed out from its surface, but the bolts curved inward, never outward, as if the sphere were consuming its own energy. Her legs locked in place. She couldn't run. She couldn't scream. Her body obeyed the sphere, not her. Her keys slipped from her fingers and hung motionless in the air before falling to the ground at a painfully slow speed, as though gravity itself were hesitating. The blue cylinder enveloped her fully. She felt the vibration first, a low, humming resonance that started in her feet and climbed through her bones like an invisible tide. Her chest tightened. Her vision sharpened unnaturally, details snapping into clarity, scratches on her car door, tiny cracks in the pavement, even the distant ridgelines of the Rockies silhouetted against the night sky. Then her body lifted, not abruptly, not violently, but with precise intention. Her toes left the ground. Her hair floated upward. Her heartbeat echoed in her throat, growing louder and louder until it sounded like someone else's pulse replacing her own. She rose into the blue light, unable to move or blink. The orb expanded. The rings shifted. A section of the sphere unfolded like a biological iris, revealing a gateway. Abigail passed through. She found herself inside a structure that resembled an operating theater, if an operating theater had been designed by something that had never seen a human or a room before. There were no straight lines, no corners, no gravity. Surfaces folded and unfolded like living tissue, rearranging themselves in slow, rhythmic pulses. The light inside wasn't emitted but grown, spreading through the space like luminescent veins moving beneath translucent skin. Abigail floated at the center, frozen upright. Shapes approached. At first they were silhouettes, tall and spindle-like, moving in patterns that did not adhere to physics. As they drew closer, she saw their bodies shimmered with layered translucence, like their forms were built from overlapping sheets of liquid glass. Their heads were elongated ovals with no visible features, but when they faced her, she felt pressure in her mind, as though they could see through her without needing eyes. One positioned itself in front of her. A thin appendage extended. The air around her skull vibrated. Her memories surged outward uncontrollably. Her first day of nursing school, grandmother's funeral, her breakup last year, the patient she couldn't save, the one she did. Fear swelled, but the being radiated calm, a manufactured calm, forcing her to detach from herself. Her heartbeat slowed. Her thoughts spread out like ink in water. Then came a vision, a map. Not Earth, not the solar system. Something larger, recursive, layered with spiral geometries that folded into each other like mirrored fractals. A sense of direction. A sense of purpose. A message not spoken but imprinted: you will be returned, but you will not remain unchanged. The chamber pulsed. The beings dissolved into shimmering mist. Abigail felt herself falling through light, and she woke sprawled on the asphalt beside her car, gasping for air. Her phone buzzed violently on the ground nearby, flooded with notifications. The wind had returned. Traffic sounds filled the distance once more. She scrambled to her feet, trembling. Her car alarm was blaring. Her keys lay exactly where she had dropped them. The sphere was gone. But on the side of her neck she felt something warm. When she touched it, she recoiled. A faint glowing imprint, an intricate ring of interlocking lines, pulsing gently beneath her skin like a living tattoo. For the next several weeks, co-workers would report strange things, her presence causing flickers in medical monitors. Blue reflections appearing in her pupils when she looked at reflective surfaces, her body occasionally lifting milliseconds off the ground before settling again. Abigail kept silent, because deep inside she knew one thing beyond all doubt. The orb over Denver hadn't chosen her by accident. It had marked her, and whatever had begun in that parking lot was nowhere near finished. The man who walked out of Route 17 in rural Virginia was the kind of road that seemed suspended outside of time. Long, empty stretches of cracked asphalt lined with old tobacco barns, broken fences, and forests so dense they swallowed sound. Locals avoided driving it after midnight. Strange lights, they said. Voices that ain't there. Most people dismissed the stories as superstition, but Officer Daniel Rowe had never been superstitious. A 14-year veteran of the Virginia State Police, Rowe was practical, grounded, and usually bored on night patrol. That changed on a fog-thickened Sunday at 3:08 a.m., when dispatch alerted him to a stalled vehicle on Route 17 near mile marker 142. Possible breakdown, the dispatcher said. Copy, Rowe replied. Fog drifted across the road in heavy waves as he approached the scene. His headlights revealed an old blue Ford Taurus sitting sideways across the shoulder, driver's door wide open. The engine was off. The radio crackled with quiet static, even though the keys weren't in the ignition. Rowe stepped out of his cruiser, hand resting near his holster. "Hello," he called. "State Police." Silence. Then faintly something moved inside the fog. At first it looked like a shifting shadow, a silhouette bending unnaturally as though the fog itself were shaping into a human form. Rowe tightened his grip on his flashlight. "Sir, if you need assistance, make yourself known." No response. He moved closer to the Taurus and peered inside. The driver's seat was empty. The rear seat looked untouched, but the driver's phone lay on the floorboard, screen cracked, clock frozen at 3:03 a.m. Rowe checked the trunk. Nothing. As he straightened, his radio let out a harsh metallic screech, followed by a voice, not dispatch, not human, layered and glitching, like multiple tones trying to occupy the same frequency. Indicated return incomplete. Rowe froze. "Dispatch, say again," he asked, only more distortion. Then the fog parted, a man stepped onto the road. He didn't walk out so much as emerge, as if the fog had created him from scratch. He was barefoot, wearing jeans and a t-shirt soaked with condensation. His eyes were wide open, pupils blown, fixed on something above the tree line. Rowe steadied himself. "Sir, are you the owner of this vehicle?" The man didn't answer. He kept staring upward as though waiting for something to descend. Rowe took a cautious step forward. "I'm Officer Rowe, can you hear me?" The man blinked slowly, like he'd forgotten how eyelids worked. When he finally looked at Rowe, there was no recognition, only an alien emptiness. Then he whispered a phrase Rowe would never forget. "They put me back in the wrong place." Rowe felt a chill crawl beneath his bulletproof vest. "Who put you back?" The man turned his head with mechanical slowness. "They kept me in the light, they opened me, they tried to close me again, but not right. Not right." His voice fractured on the last words, breaking into two overlapping tones that did not belong in the same throat. At that moment the overhead fog lit up, not from his cruiser's beam, not from lightning, but from a source above the cloud layer, a pulsating white sphere shining down like a hidden star. The fog glowed with rippling light patterns, circular and recursive, rotating like the inside of a kaleidoscope. Rowe instinctively reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I have an unknown." The sphere brightened. The radio shrieked. Rowe dropped it in pain as the device emitted a frequency that rattled his spine. The barefoot man stepped toward the center of the road. "Don't," Rowe shouted. "Stay where you are." But the man lifted both arms, palms forward, as if greeting something only he could see. Light speared down in a perfect column. The asphalt cracked beneath it. Air folded inward. The fog spiraled upward in a corkscrew. The man screamed, not in fear but in recognition, in completion. The sound was unearthly, vibrating at several pitches at once. Then his body lifted off the ground. His limbs bent at impossible angles. His chest arched backward. His spine elongated as if something inside him were trying to escape or enter. Rowe staggered backward, shielding his eyes as the light became blinding. The column split into multiple beams that sliced through the fog and converged on the man's skull. His scream stopped instantly. Then he collapsed. The light vanished. Silence swallowed the road. Rowe rushed forward. The man lay motionless, breathing shallowly, eyes unfocused. When Rowe rolled him over, he saw something etched into the man's forearms, two symmetrical spirals glowing faintly beneath the skin, pulsing like a second heartbeat. Rowe called an ambulance. The man never regained normal consciousness. Over the following weeks, Route 17 became a hotspot for unexplained sightings, lights, distortions, voices on radios that didn't belong to any known frequency. Investigators reviewed Rowe's dashcam footage. Most of it was static, but one frame, a single, corrupted freeze frame, showed something above the fog, a disc-shaped silhouette, ringed with geometric symbols, hovering silently above the highway. It disappeared the moment Rowe blinked, and the barefoot man never stopped whispering in the hospital, "They put me back wrong." The disappearance at Glacier Point in Yosemite National Park was quiet that evening, too quiet for midsummer. The lookout usually buzzed with tourists, hikers, and photographers waiting to capture the last traces of sunlight sliding across Half Dome. But tonight the wind seemed to hold its breath, and the sky took on an unusual metallic hue as if the atmosphere itself were being stretched thin. Emily Rhodes, a 33-year-old freelance geologist from Sacramento, stood near the railing with her field notebook open. She came often, claiming the granite formations helped her think. What she really meant was that the silence helped her forget the breakup, the missed deadlines, the creeping sense that her life had stalled. She leaned forward, jotting notes about mineral fractures she had examined earlier in the valley. Behind her, a couple murmured softly and a family snapped photos. Park rangers chatted by a patrol truck, normal, calm, until the wind changed. A warm gust swept across the lookout, followed by a sudden cold plunge that raised goosebumps across Emily's skin. The trees below swayed, then froze mid-motion, as though someone had paused the world. The chatter behind her dissolved into a muffled hum, stretched thin like distant radio static. Emily turned around. The people near her were moving strangely, not slowly but out of sync. Their gestures lagged, fragmented, glitching like corrupted video frames. A ranger's flashlight beam stuttered in midair. A mother's hair hovered unnaturally, floating upward. "What is happening?" Emily whispered. Then the sky split open. A bright, impossible seam tore across the twilight, glowing white-blue like fractured ice cracking under intense pressure. The seam expanded, forming a geometry that defied anything Emily had ever seen, a rotating arc composed of thin metallic lines, interlocking like a celestial engine. From the center of the structure, a thin column of light descended in perfect silence. It hit the ground only 10 feet from Emily. The concrete beneath her feet vibrated. The railing hummed. Her heart thudded against her ribs, syncing involuntarily with the rhythmic pulses of the beam. Tourists screamed, but their screams dimmed, stretched, and folded into echoing layers as if the sound were being swallowed and dissected. Emily stepped backward, but the beam followed her. "Stop!" She yelled at it, at the air, at the sky, at whatever was orchestrating this. The light wrapped around her torso. Her legs buckled. The world inverted. She rose into the air, lifted backward toward the crack in the sky. Her notebook slipped from her fingers and drifted downward like a slow-falling feather. The last thing she saw before being pulled inside the seam was the horrified face of a park ranger reaching for her, a hand stretching toward her but freezing inches away. Inside was neither space nor structure. It was a dimension that felt poured rather than built. Emily floated within a dark expanse crossed by millions of luminescent threads, like neurons firing inside a colossal brain. Each thread pulsed with color, shifting from violet to teal to icy blue. They stretched infinitely into all directions. Shapes emerged from the darkness, not humanoid, not even symmetrical. These beings moved like evolving equations, clusters of shifting polygons, translucent membranes, and thin filaments that adjusted to each other in real time. Their bodies flickered between dimensions, appearing both near and impossibly far at once. One approached her. Her mind convulsed. Not physically, cognitively. Her sense of self fractured like shattering glass. Her memories spilled into the space around her, suspended like glowing fragments, childhood birthdays, hiking trips, arguments with her ex, late-night deadlines, her father teaching her how to use a compass. Each memory pulsed as though being scanned. Then came something new. A swirl of symbols embedded itself into her mind, spirals, arcs, intersecting lines that rotated in increasingly complex patterns. The shapes accelerated until she understood they weren't symbols, they were coordinates. Coordinates that made no sense in three-dimensional space. Coordinates meant for something beyond human navigation. The beings folded around her, layering themselves into a cocoon of light. Her body convulsed once. Then, the world snapped. Emily awoke lying face down on the concrete of Glacier Point. Rangers surrounded her. Tourists cried. Cameras flashed. Drones buzzed overhead. It was chaos. She sat up slowly, her vision blurred, her skin vibrating with a faint electric charge. People shouted questions at her, but their voices sounded distorted, slowed, as though she were hearing them underwater. "Emily, can you hear me?" A ranger asked. Her lips trembled. Something warm spread across her wrist. She looked down. A glowing symbol, the same interlocking coordinate pattern from the dimension, was burned into her skin like a brand. The lines pulsed gently, syncing with the beat of something that wasn't her pulse. Reporters later called it the Glacier Point event, but Emily knew better. This wasn't an event. This was an invitation, and the coordinates burned into her arm were not random. Someone, something, fully expected her to follow them. The rooftop selection. Ethan Mallory had never understood why his office building needed a rooftop access door. No one used it. No one even talked about it. But after another suffocating 11-hour day at his accounting firm in downtown Chicago, he found himself climbing the last flight of stairs, desperate for air that didn't smell like printer toner. The night was cold and cloudless. The city glowed beneath him, endless windows, neon signage, sirens echoing in the distance. Ethan stepped onto the gravel-coated rooftop, rubbing his temples. 37 years old, burnt out, 2 promotions passed over, a life reduced to spreadsheets and mild insomnia. He exhaled a long, shaky breath. Then the wind shifted. Not a breeze, a directional pull. As if the air itself had decided to move somewhere with intention. Ethan frowned and stepped closer to the roof's edge. He looked upward. A distortion hovered above the skyline. Not a cloud. Not a drone. Not anything with a human explanation. It was a shimmering, translucent sphere about the size of a car, pulsating with faint blue light. The surface wasn't smooth, it rippled constantly, fracturing into tiny geometric patterns that dissolved and reformed like a living algorithm. It made no sound, but Ethan felt a deep vibration building in his chest. Then the sphere opened. A vertical seam spread across it like an eye dilating, revealing a swirling core of white-gold energy inside. The city lights flickered. A nearby construction crane groaned. Ethan stumbled backward. "What the hell?" he whispered. The energy inside the sphere spiraled downward, forming a column of soft, luminescent mist. It stretched until it reached the rooftop, landing just inches from Ethan's feet. The air temperature plummeted. His breath crystallized. His vision sharpened unnaturally. Something stepped out of the mist. Tall, humanoid in outline, but stretched too long, too slender. Its skin glowed faintly through translucent layers like bioluminescent tissue submerged underwater. Its head had no features, just a smooth, elongated shape with swirling patterns that shifted like constellations. Ethan couldn't move. Fear held him. Curiosity held him even tighter. The being raised an arm. Instantly, the mist wrapped around Ethan's legs, hardening into invisible restraints. His body locked in place. His pulse thundered. A voice entered his mind, not spoken, not heard, imposed. "You are observed." Ethan gasped. "Get out of my head. You are suitable." Suitable for what? The being stepped closer. Ethan saw swirling star patterns embedded in its skin, miniature galaxies rotating beneath semi-transparent flesh. The being raised a second arm, and Ethan's consciousness exploded outward. Memories fractured into streams of light, his lonely childhood in Kansas, his failed engagement, his fear of being ordinary, his secret longing for a life with meaning. The being analyzed every thread, rearranging them like data points. Then came the visions, a star system with triple suns, a construct the size of a continent floating in black space, beings folding into layered dimensions, a tear in space-time spiraling like a living hurricane. Ethan's knees buckled, but he couldn't fall. The being lowered its hand. The mist receded. "The selection is complete," the voice said. "You will carry what you are given." The sphere collapsed inward with a roarless implosion, shrinking into a pinprick of light that shot upward into the atmosphere. Suddenly the city returned to normal, cars honking, wind blowing, lights humming. Ethan crumpled to the rooftop, gasping, shaking violently. He looked at his hands. Glowing lines burned beneath the skin, intricate symbols arranged in concentric circles, slowly rotating like a clockwork mechanism made of light. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the night wind. The next morning, a janitor found Ethan unconscious on the rooftop. Emergency responders carried him out as he stared blankly at the sky, whispering, "They chose me. I saw where they come from." Doctors dismissed it as psychosis. Co-workers whispered rumors, but none of them saw what Ethan saw in reflective surfaces afterward. His pupils weren't fully human anymore. They now contained faint, rotating star patterns, a permanent imprint of the selection. The Montana cabin experiment winters in northern Montana were merciless, wind carving through the pines like knives, snow swallowing entire roads, and nights so silent it felt like the world had stopped breathing. For 62-year-old Vietnam veteran Henry Lawson, that silence was the reason he'd chosen to retire here. After decades of noise, of cities, crowds, and memories he couldn't shake, Henry just wanted quiet. His cabin, a battered structure deep in the Flathead National Forest, sat miles from the nearest town. No neighbors, no streetlights, only the forest and the stars. But the silence that came on the night of January 18th was wrong. Henry was sitting by the fireplace, polishing the wooden stock of his old Winchester, when the flames flickered sideways, then froze mid-flicker. Embers hovered motionless in the air like a paused explosion. The ticking of the clock stopped. The wind outside cut off mid-howl. His breath crystallized in front of him and stayed suspended. Henry stood abruptly. "What in God's name?" Then came the hum. A deep, subsonic vibration rattled the cabin frames, shaking dust from the rafters. The shotgun slipped from Henry's hands and floated, weightless, rotating slowly in front of him. Henry backed against the wall, panic clawing at his chest. No, not this again. He had seen lights in the jungle once, strange ones the army later dismissed as chemical illusions. He had never believed that explanation. Tonight proved he'd been right. The ceiling began to glow. A wide, circular patch of wood turned transparent, revealing not the night sky, but a blinding white void filled with swirling geometric structures. The air trembled as a column of light extended downward, expanding until it filled the entire cabin in a perfect cylinder. Henry's body locked in place. His muscles refused every command. His heartbeat accelerated until it became a rapid, painful drum inside his ribs. The light intensified. Then they arrived. 3 tall beings emerged from the column, elongated forms with limbs so thin they looked carved from strands of glass. Their bodies shimmered with internal luminescence as though each one housed a miniature sun. Their heads were narrow with no eyes or mouth, yet Henry felt watched, examined, dissected by their presence alone. One approached him. Henry tried to scream, but the air refused to carry sound. A transparent membrane extended from the creature's hand, passing straight through Henry's chest like a scanning beam. Cold surged through him, deeper than bone. His vision exploded with images, a spiraling star map, a planet he had never seen, a structure floating in space like an interdimensional scaffold, rows of human figures suspended in light, rows of non-human figures suspended beside them. His mind buckled. "No, stop," he forced out, though the sound barely formed. The being tilted its head. The scanning intensified. Henry's memories spilled outward like a broken dam, Combat flashes, childhood moments, lost friends, hospital lights, every trauma and triumph torn from him and suspended in the air as glowing fragments. Then the second being inserted something, not physically, mentally. A blueprint, a sequence, a design. Patterns of rotating symbols fused themselves into Henry's mind, too complex for human comprehension. His body convulsed, limbs jerking violently as the implantation occurred. When they finished, the first being spoken to his thoughts with a voice that was not a voice. "You will not remember correctly. You will carry what is required." Henry collapsed. The light withdrew, the beings dissolved, and the ceiling returned to normal, the crackling fire resuming its frozen flicker, the shotgun clattering to the floor, the wind finishing its cut-off howl. Everything went back to what it had been. Except Henry. He woke hours later lying face down on the cabin floor, drenched in sweat, trembling uncontrollably. His vision flickered with afterimages of the star map. His temples throbbed with impossible mathematical sequences. He crawled to the bathroom and flicked on the light. When he looked in the mirror, he stopped breathing. A glowing pattern, an intricate symbol of spirals, arcs, and intersecting lines, was burned into the skin across his chest. It pulsed softly, like a second heartbeat, dimming and brightening in a rhythm that wasn't human. Over the next week, Henry noticed more changes. Tools in his workshop rearranged themselves when he walked past. Animals avoided the cabin entirely. Electronics malfunctioned in his presence. And at night, when he closed his eyes, he saw the blueprint, saw how the pieces connected, saw the shape of something he wasn't meant to understand. Something they were building. Something they needed him for. The authorities found him months later wandering the forest barefoot, muttering phrases in a language no one recognized, the symbol on his chest still glowing beneath his shirt. They called it a psychotic break. Henry knew better. He hadn't broken. He'd been rewritten. The disappearance in New Orleans had always been a city of ghosts, echoes of jazz drifting through humid streets, stories whispered in alleys older than the country itself, and strange pockets of silence that lingered long after the crowds moved on. But what happened on the night of May 6th in the Treme district was not the kind of haunting locals were familiar with. Jamal Price, a 28-year-old saxophonist trying to make rent between bar gigs, had just finished a late set at a rundown club on Rampart Street. It was 2:19 a.m. when he stepped outside, sax case slung over his shoulder, sweat still clinging to his skin, the humid night wrapped around him like a damp blanket. He checked his phone, no messages, low battery. Another quiet walk home. The street was deserted, not unusual at this hour, but the silence felt thicker than normal, as though the night itself were listening. Jamal lit a cigarette, took a drag, and started walking toward Esplanade Avenue. He hummed under his breath, a habit he'd had since he was a kid, letting his mind drift. Then the streetlights went out, not one by one, all at once. A snap of darkness swallowed the block, followed by a deep, vibrating hum that spread through the pavement like a heartbeat from beneath the earth. Jamal froze. The hell? The hum pulsed again, and the air changed. The humidity evaporated instantly, replaced by an electric cold that prickled across his skin. The smell of the city, fried food, spilled beer, exhaust fumes, vanished, replaced by a sterile metallic scent that didn't belong anywhere near Louisiana. Jamal turned in a slow circle. That's when he saw it. Floating above the intersection ahead was a shape, dark, silent, perfectly still. Not a drone, not a helicopter, not anything that made sense. It hovered like a disk carved from the night sky, edges pulsating faintly with thin white light. Jamal stepped back, nearly tripping over his own feet. "No, man. No, no, no," he muttered. He reached for his phone, but the screen was dead. The hum intensified, vibrating his bones. The street began to blur slightly, as though heat waves were rising from the asphalt. Then everything tilted. The buildings along the street distorted, stretching upward, leaning inward, warping into impossible geometry. The sky rotated in a slow spiral. Sound collapsed into a low-frequency drone that felt like it was inside Jamal's skull. He dropped his sax case. It floated before hitting the ground in slow motion. A beam of soft, opaque light descended from the hovering craft. Not bright, not blinding, just present, like a substance rather than illumination. It enveloped Jamal's legs, his muscles froze, his lungs locked, his heartbeat stuttered. "Help!" he tried to whisper, but the sound didn't escape. He rose from the ground. His body ascended smoothly, unnaturally, as though being pulled along a track. His feet dangled helplessly, his arms stuck at his sides. The beam held him in perfect suspension. Halfway up, the world around him dissolved. He emerged inside a chamber that defied architecture, an expanding void filled with floating panels of luminescent crystal. Each panel displayed moving patterns, shifting star fields, fractal structures, and geometric sequences that rearranged faster than he could comprehend. Jamal hung in midair, immobilized. Three beings drifted toward him. They weren't walking, they weren't flying. They simply existed in motion, slender forms made of translucent layers, their limbs bending with fluid precision. Their heads were elongated, splitting into branching structures that resembled antennae made of living light. One approached until its face hovered inches from Jamal's. He felt something press into his mind. Not a touch, a presence. It pulled memories out of him like threads from fabric, learning saxophone from his uncle, playing his first gig at 16, his mother's funeral, his fear of never being good enough, his hope that music would save him. The presence examined each memory with surgical precision. Then came the visions, a vast, metallic structure orbiting a blue-white star, a desert world with monolithic spires reaching toward a purple sky, beings assembling into collective formations like synchronized equations, a spiraling rift in space opening into layered dimensions. Jamal's chest tightened. The presence spoke inside him, "You are harmonic." He didn't understand. "Your frequencies align." One being extended a thin, luminous tendril toward his throat. A pulse of energy struck him. Jamal's body arched as a wave of sound, not heard but felt, rippled through him, vibrating every cell. His scream became a chord. The chamber vibrated in response. The beings tilted their heads, observing something only they perceived. Then a blinding flash. Jamal dropped onto the street. He hit the pavement hard, gasping, his vision doubled. New Orleans' humid night restored itself instantly, lights returning, insects buzzing, distant jazz echoing from somewhere. His sax case lay beside him. People rushed over, shouting, "You okay, brother? Man, you fell from where? We calling an ambulance." Jamal couldn't answer. His throat burned. His voice felt altered. He managed one word, barely audible. They listened. Paramedics later found something etched beneath the skin on the front of his neck, a faint glowing ring made of microscopic symbols, arranged like musical notation from a language no human had ever written. And when Jamal played his sax again weeks later, a strange overtone appeared in every note, a second voice, a hidden frequency, something that wasn't human and wasn't entirely his. The archive basement incident, the Boston Historical Records Center, was the kind of place only 3 types of people ever visited: graduate students, bored retirees, and archivists who preferred the company of dusty documents over other humans. Nathan Cole fell squarely into the third category. At 41, Nathan had built a quiet life as the center's senior archivist. His days were predictable, sorting, cataloging, preserving the forgotten paper trails of America's past. He liked the silence. He trusted the silence. It never asked anything from him. But on September 3rd at 9:47 p.m., the silence asked everything. Nathan was working overtime alone in the sub-basement, a concrete labyrinth beneath the main building, lined with shelves of microfilm, government records, and box collections no one had touched in decades. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The AC vent rattled. Everything was normal until every fluorescent bulb went out simultaneously. A hard snap of darkness swallowed the room. The AC cut off. The hum stopped. The building seemed to exhale. "Nah, not tonight," Nathan muttered, pulling out his phone. No signal. Phone screen flickered, went black. He clicked his flashlight. It flickered too, dim, unstable. Then he heard it. a whispering vibration in the walls, like the sound of distant radio static trying to form words. He turned the flashlight toward the far wall and froze. The concrete surface was moving, not cracking, not shifting, moving like liquid metal rippling under invisible fingers. The wall bulged outward, forming a circular pattern that pulsed like a heartbeat trapped behind stone. Nathan stumbled back. Jesus! The ripple widened. The concrete peeled away in concentric rings, revealing a swirling void beneath. A dark portal lined with thin, luminous filaments that looked disturbingly biological. They twitched. They reached. The portal expanded until it almost filled the width of the room. Nathan's flashlight died. The only light came from the portal, an eerie indigo glow that painted the metal shelving in elongated shadows. Boxes vibrated, labels fluttering as if caught in a wind that didn't exist. A deep hum rolled out of the void, vibrating Nathan's ribs, his teeth, the fluid in his ears. Then the beings entered. They unfolded from the portal like origami creatures unfurling into 3 dimensions, tall, layered with translucent planes of shifting geometry. Their limbs resembled elongated prisms that bent at angles no biological structure should. Their faces were masks of shimmering membrane, constantly rearranging into new configurations, as if trying on different forms. Nathan was rooted to the floor. One being drifted toward him. Not walked, drifted, floating a few centimeters above the ground, casting no shadows. It extended an appendage. Nathan heard something inside his skull, an intrusive, vibrating tone that wasn't sound at all. His memories ignited. Childhood afternoons spent reading alone. Arguments with his ex-wife. Digitizing old war records. Every forgotten pain, every quiet victory, all pulled from him like loose threads unraveling. Nathan cried out, clutching his head. "Stop, please." The being's membrane face shifted, spiraling into a symbol. The vibrations intensified. A second being approached and placed a thin, glowing filament against Nathan's chest. The filament pierced his sternum without breaking the skin, passing through matter like it wasn't matter. Nathan convulsed. Visions poured into him. A titanic structure floating inside a dimensional pocket. Thousands of human consciousnesses suspended in glowing lattices. Time loops folding into themselves. A future Earth with fractures spreading across space-time. A warning, a selection. Nathan dropped to his knees, screaming. The beings did not react. They continued the implantation, embedding complex symbols into the core of his mind, symbols that rotated, evolved, and nested within each other like self-growing equations. When they finished, all 3 beings recoiled back toward the portal. The void pulsed once. Then the portal collapsed inward with a thunderous implosion of silence, vanishing without a trace. The concrete wall returned as though it had never changed. The basement went black. Nathan lay writhing on the floor, clutching his skull as the symbols burned in his consciousness. Hours later, security found him wandering the upper archives barefoot, trembling, whispering to the shelves. "Nobody will believe me. Nobody will believe what they stored inside me." He collapsed before they could question him. At the hospital, doctors discovered something impossible. A faint, glowing imprint of layered circles and constellation-like symbols burned across his chest, visible only under low light, pulsing with a rhythm that did not match his heartbeat. Nathan never fully recovered. He was released weeks later, quiet, vacant, staring often into corners as if expecting the walls to open again. And every night at exactly 9:47 p.m., he felt the air vibrate around him, the same way the basement once had, as though the beings were checking their work. Because they hadn't abducted him. They had archived him. If these encounters pulled you in, make sure to subscribe. This archive grows with every strange disappearance, every unexplained signal, and every witness who dares to speak. New abduction files drop regularly, each one darker, deeper, and closer than the last. Stay with us before the next story chooses you.